Florence, a city pulsing with life in the 1400s, was about to be turned upside down. It wasn't by war or plague, but by bankers. Yes, bankers. The Medici family, with their colossal wealth, decided they would not just build palaces or fund armies. They chose to reshape the very way people saw beauty, truth, and the world itself. They didn't just buy pretty things, they ignited a revolution in art, backing wild ideas and pushing the boundaries of what was thought possible. For centuries, the world had seen art in one way. Then the Medici stepped in and everything changed. These aren't just stories about paint and marble, these are tales of ambition, genius, and money, creating a world unlike anything seen before. Number 9, the Laurentian Library by Michelangelo. Imagine a staircase that flows like liquid stone. A staircase so grand and imposing that it seems to ripple with unseen currents, its steps bulging and curving in ways no architect had dared before. This is what Michelangelo, the undisputed master of marble and fresco, unleashed within the Laurentian Library, a project bankrolled by Medici Pope Clement VII, born Giulio di Giuliano de' Medici. The library itself was built to house the vast collection of scrolls and books accumulated by the Medici family, a treasure trove of classical texts and illuminated manuscripts that represented centuries of knowledge. But it wasn't just about the books, it was about the setting for those books. Clement VII, a man of immense power and refined taste, understood that the presentation of knowledge was as vital as the knowledge itself. He entrusted this crucial task to Michelangelo, who had already stunned the world with his David and the Sistine Chapel ceiling. Michelangelo's design for the Laurentian Library, begun in 1523, was a radical departure from conventional architectural thinking. The library was to be a testament to Medici intellectual patronage, a beacon of learning connected to the ancient Basilica of San Lorenzo, a church already heavily endowed and rebuilt by Medici hands. The building itself was designed in two main parts, a vestibule, or resetto, which was essentially a massive entrance hall, and the reading room. It was in the vestibule that Michelangelo truly experimented. The space is tall and narrow, almost oppressive, with columns that appear to be sunk into the walls rather than standing freely. Niches intended for statues remain empty, giving a sense of expectation, a silent grandeur. The windows, topped with unusual triangular pediments, add to the curious, almost unsettling atmosphere. This was a place where light and shadow played tricks, where traditional architectural elements were twisted and reinterpreted. The most striking feature, the grand staircase, was an innovation in itself. It dominates the vestibule, rising in 3 flights with its central section wider and more pronounced than the flanking ones. The steps themselves are not uniform. They swell outwards in the center, creating a dynamic, almost organic feel. Some historical accounts suggest that Michelangelo himself, usually known for his sculpting rather than carpentry, crafted wooden models for the staircase and other elements, ensuring every curve and angle was precisely as he intended. The massive volutes, or scroll-like elements, at the foot of the stairs seem to spill out into the room, inviting, almost pulling the visitor upwards. This staircase was not just a means of access, it was a sculpture in itself, a dramatic prelude to the quiet sanctity of the reading room beyond. It was a piece of architecture that moved and flowed, anticipating future Baroque extravagance while still rooted in classical forms. The reading room, by contrast, is long and serene, bathed in natural light from tall, evenly spaced windows. Here the emphasis shifted from dramatic entrance to focused study. The wooden carrels, or reading desks, are arranged in rows, designed to be both functional and aesthetically pleasing. Each desk would have held books chained for security, a common practice in early libraries. The wooden ceiling, intricate and richly carved, complements the light stone walls. Michelangelo's design here was meticulous, down to the details of the floor pattern, which mirrors the pattern of the ceiling. This unity of design created an environment conducive to scholarly pursuit, a space where the mind could wander through ancient texts without distraction. The Medici, through Clement VII, provided the funds and the vision for such a magnificent project, understanding that true power lay not just in wealth or military might, but in the cultivation of knowledge and the presentation of it with unparalleled artistic flair. The library stood as a monument to their commitment to humanism and learning, a quiet yet profound statement etched in stone and wood, waiting for minds to engage with the wisdom it held. Number 8. The Palazzo Medici Riccardi. Imagine stepping into a fortress of quiet power, a grand urban palace that doesn't shout its wealth, but whispers it in every perfectly cut stone. This was the Palazzo Medici, begun in 1444, the very heart of the Medici family's influence in Florence, a direct commission by Cosimo de' Medici, often called Cosimo the Elder, the shrewd banker who truly cemented the family's rise. Before this palace, prominent Florentine families lived in grand, but often defensive structures, or older, less unified buildings. Cosimo, however, envisioned something new, a monumental city residence that was both a secure home and a clear statement of civic prestige, built with a refined, understated elegance that belied the family's immense riches. Cosimo initially approached Filippo Brunelleschi, the genius who had just engineered the Duomo dome. But Brunelleschi's design, by some accounts, was deemed too grand, too ostentatious, even for the subtle Cosimo, who preferred to project an image of first among equals, rather than an outright ruler. So, the commission fell to Michelangelo di Bartolomeo, a versatile architect and sculptor who understood Cosimo's vision for a powerful yet restrained statement. Michelangelo delivered a design that became the prototype for many subsequent Renaissance palaces, influencing architectural trends for centuries. The Palazzo Medici is a cube, almost perfectly symmetrical, built around a central courtyard. Its most striking innovation lies in its exterior facade, which cleverly expresses the building's 3 internal floors through varying degrees of rustication. The ground floor, facing the street, is built of massive, rough-hewn stones, giving it a powerful, fortress-like appearance, a subtle reminder of the family's strength and security. This rugged base also allowed for large arched doorways, including the main entrance for carriages and the famous corner loggia, an open-air porch that once served as a public space, reflecting the Medici's civic engagement. As your gaze moves upwards, the stonework becomes progressively smoother. The second story features ashlar masonry, where the stones are finely dressed but still clearly defined. This floor housed the main living and reception rooms, larger and more formal spaces. The windows here are more elaborate, with double arches and ornate carvings. The third and top floor is built with almost perfectly smooth ashlar, giving it a refined, almost domestic feel. This progression from rough to smooth, from heavy to light, was a brilliant architectural device, conveying a sense of stability and progression, mirroring the Medici's own rise from merchants to leaders. The central courtyard is another triumph of design. Surrounded by arcades on all 4 sides, supported by slender columns, it provided light and air to the interior rooms. This courtyard was a private world within the public palace, often adorned with classical sculptures from the Medici collection, including Donatello's famous David, which once stood there. It was a place for leisurely strolls, quiet conversation, and the display of art. The ground floor of the palace also contained offices, storerooms, and servant quarters, while the upper floors were dedicated to the family's private apartments, dining halls, and the celebrated Magi Chapel. The Magi Chapel, hidden away on the second floor, is a marvel in itself. Though relatively small, its walls are entirely covered with a fresco cycle by Benozzo Gozzoli, depicting the procession of the Magi, filled with portraits of Medici family members and their associates, including Cosimo himself and his grandson Lorenzo. This private chapel, intended for personal devotion, also served as a discreet yet opulent display of wealth, power, and learning, filled with classical allusions and vibrant colors. The Palazzo Medici was not just a home, it was a complex statement of power, a masterpiece of urban architecture that blended security, civic duty, and sophisticated luxury, a blueprint for the future of Renaissance palace design, all thanks to Cosimo's vision and funds. Number 7. Piero della Francesca's portraiture. Picture a pair of faces, sharp and perfectly defined, gazing out from a canvas with an almost scientific precision. These are the portraits of Federico da Montefeltro, Duke of Urbino, and his wife Battista Sforza, painted by Piero della Francesca around 1472. While this specific commission was for the Duke of Urbino, Piero della Francesca's revolutionary approach to portraiture was deeply influenced by the artistic climate fostered by the Medici in Florence and by the wider Renaissance trends they encouraged. The Medici themselves were keen patrons of portraiture, commissioning works that captured the likenesses of their family members and allies, understanding the power of a finely rendered image. Piero della Francesca was a master of perspective and geometry, and he brought this mathematical rigor to his portraits. Before him, many portraits were somewhat idealized or generic, focusing more on status symbols than individual character. But Piero pushed for a new kind of realism, one that captured the unique features of his subjects with an almost clinical detachment. The most striking innovation in his double portrait of the Duke and Duchess is their profile view. This was a direct homage to ancient Roman coins and medallions, which typically depicted emperors and other important figures in profile. This choice connected the sitters to the grandeur and authority of classical antiquity, a concept highly valued in the humanist circles supported by the Medici. The profile view allowed Piero to render every detail of their faces with astonishing clarity. Federico's famous broken nose, a result of a jousting accident, is depicted without flattery, a testament to his toughness and military prowess. His skin texture, the subtle folds of his clothing, even the specific details of his headwear are rendered with an almost microscopic exactness. Battista Sforza's portrait is equally meticulous, her delicate features, her elaborate hairstyle, and the rich embroidery of her dress all captured with painstaking detail. This wasn't just about likeness, it was about character, about revealing something of the inner life through outward appearance. Beyond the profiles, Piero integrated a breathtaking landscape background. Federico's portrait shows him against a vast rolling countryside dotted with trees and buildings, receding into the distance with flawless atmospheric perspective, making the viewer feel the immense scale of the world. Battista's portrait, on the other hand, features a more serene and cultivated landscape, reflecting perhaps her gentler nature and perhaps the well-ordered world over which she presided. These landscapes were not mere backdrops, they were integral parts of the composition, adding depth and meaning to the portraits, grounding the figures in their environment and hinting at their territories and influence. This fusion of meticulous portraiture with expansive, realistic landscapes was a significant innovation, creating a sense of grandeur and specific context for the sitters. The use of oil paint, though developed earlier in Northern Europe, allowed Piero to achieve the incredible detail and luminosity seen in these portraits. The slow drying time of oil allowed for subtle blending and the creation of rich, vibrant colors that seemed to glow from within. This mastery of the medium, combined with his understanding of light and shadow, allowed him to create a sense of three-dimensionality that made the figures appear almost sculpted. The Medici, with their connections across Europe and their open-mindedness to new artistic techniques, would have certainly appreciated and perhaps even encouraged the adoption of such advanced methods. Piero della Francesca's portraits, with their unflinching realism, classical allusions, and integration of landscape, set a new standard for individual representation in art, moving beyond simple likeness to capture the essence of a person, a pursuit deeply valued in the humanistic environment that Florentine patronage helped to foster. Number 6. Verrocchio's workshop and Leonardo's early training. Picture a bustling hive of artistic activity in Florence, a place where the clang of hammers on bronze mingled with the scent of oil paint and fresh plaster. This was the workshop of Andrea del Verrocchio, a true Renaissance polymath, active from the 1460s onwards. Verrocchio was not just a sculptor and painter, he was a master of many trades, and his workshop became a legendary training ground for some of the biggest names in art history, including the young Leonardo da Vinci, Sandro Botticelli, and Pietro Perugino. The Medici family, always on the lookout for talent and innovation, were key patrons of Verrocchio and his workshop, providing commissions that allowed this dynamic environment to flourish. Their support meant Verrocchio could maintain a large studio, attract the best apprentices, and push artistic boundaries. Verrocchio's workshop was an innovation in itself. It wasn't just a place where artists learned to copy existing styles. It was a center of empirical observation, technical experimentation, and collaborative learning. Their apprentices, like Leonardo, were exposed to a vast array of skills and materials. They learned how to prepare pigments, how to work with clay and wax for sculptural models, how to cast bronze, how to handle brushes, and how to draw with precision. Crucially, they were encouraged to study the natural world around them. Verrocchio himself was known for his detailed anatomical studies and his keen eye for naturalistic representation, and he instilled this rigorous approach in his students. Leonardo da Vinci, in particular, blossomed under Verrocchio's tutelage, entering the workshop around 1466 at a young age. He quickly absorbed the diverse skills on offer. Historical accounts suggest that Verrocchio taught him not just painting and sculpting, but also engineering, metallurgy, and even optics. This broad, multidisciplinary approach to art, where scientific inquiry informed artistic creation, was a hallmark of the workshop and would become a defining characteristic of Leonardo's own genius. One famous anecdote tells of Verrocchio allowing Leonardo to paint an angel in his master's baptism of Christ. The young Leonardo's angel was so remarkably lifelike and ethereal that it reportedly convinced Verrocchio to lay down his brush forever, admitting he had been surpassed. Whether entirely true or not, the story illustrates the rapid development of skill fostered in the workshop. The Medici often commissioned works directly from Verrocchio's workshop, knowing they would get high-quality art and often nurture rising stars. For example, Lorenzo de' Medici commissioned Verrocchio to create the bronze group of Christ and St. Thomas for Orsa Michelangelo, a public church. He also commissioned the bronze Puto with a dolphin for the courtyard fountain of the Palazzo Vecchio, which was eventually moved to the courtyard of the Palazzo Medici. These commissions provided vital income and exposure for the workshop and its apprentices. The Medici were not just buying finished pieces, they were investing in the very system that produced artistic genius. The emphasis on drawing from life was another key innovation. Verrocchio's apprentices were taught to make detailed sketches of human figures, animals, plants, and drapery. This practice, combined with a deep understanding of anatomy, allowed artists to create figures that were not just beautiful, but also believable, conveying a sense of weight, movement, and emotion. This rigorous observational training laid the groundwork for the realism and dynamism that would define high Renaissance art. The workshop system, nurtured by the continuous flow of Medici patronage, created an environment where artistic talent could be identified, cultivated, and pushed to extraordinary new heights, ultimately changing the face of European art. It was a factory of genius, funded by the bankers who believed in the power of beauty and knowledge. Number 5. Michelangelo's David. Picture a towering figure carved from a single, impossibly large block of marble, a young man standing poised for battle, his gaze fixed, his muscles taut with suppressed energy. This is Michelangelo's David, a masterpiece that redefined monumental sculpture and the very idea of the heroic nude. While the David was ultimately a commission from the Operae of the Duomo, the powerful board overseeing the Florence Cathedral, and later taken over by the Florentine Signoria, the city government, it is impossible to separate Michelangelo's creation from the pervasive influence and direct patronage of the Medici family on his early life and training. Michelangelo's talent was recognized early, and it was Lorenzo de' Medici, known as Lorenzo the Magnificent, who took the young artist into his household around 1489. Lorenzo, a humanist and patron of the arts, established the Medici Sculpture Garden near San Marco, a kind of informal academy where young artists could study classical sculpture and learn from the likes of Bertoldo di Giovanni, Donatello's pupil. This environment, directly sponsored by Lorenzo, provided Michelangelo with unparalleled access to classical art and the finest artistic instruction available. It was here that he absorbed the principles of anatomy, learned to carve stone, and developed his deep admiration for the human form, an admiration that would culminate in David. Without Lorenzo's early patronage and the unique educational opportunities he provided, Michelangelo's skills and vision might never have reached such dizzying heights. The block of marble itself has a legendary story. It had been quarried over 40 years earlier for a different sculptor who had botched the job, leaving it with an awkward shallow shape dubbed the Giant. Many artists had attempted and failed to envision a figure from it. The challenge was immense, a tall, narrow block with a damaged surface. But Michelangelo, with his intimate understanding of marble and his audacious vision, saw possibilities where others saw only waste. He spent months studying the block, envisioning the figure within its confines, a process of intense mental and physical engagement. When the 17-foot tall David was unveiled in 1504, it caused a sensation. Unlike earlier depictions of David, which often showed him after his victory with Goliath's head at his feet, Michelangelo chose to capture the moment before the battle. David stands ready, slingshot over his shoulder, a stone clutched in his hand, his brow furrowed in concentration. His body, a marvel of anatomical precision, is in a state of contrapposto, a classical pose, where the weight is shifted to one leg, creating a dynamic, naturalistic curve in the torso. Every muscle, every vein is rendered with breathtaking detail, conveying not just physical strength, but also a deep sense of psychological intensity. The youthful hero embodied the Florentine Republic's own self-image, courageous, resourceful, and ready to face powerful adversaries. The David was not just a statue, it was a political statement, a symbol of Florentine liberty. Its immense scale, its dramatic pose, and its perfect execution made it an instant icon. It showcased Michelangelo's unparalleled skill in carving marble, transforming a flawed block into a living, breathing figure. It demonstrated a profound understanding of classical ideals combined with a raw emotional power. The David solidified Michelangelo's reputation as the greatest sculptor of his age, a genius whose early career had been nurtured and shaped by the enlightened patronage of the Medici, even for a commission that eventually became a public statement of defiance against perceived tyranny, including that of the Medici themselves in later turbulent times. The Medici's initial investment in the young artist's talent paid dividends for centuries to come. Number 4. Botticelli's mythological paintings. Imagine stepping into a vibrant, dreamlike garden where ancient gods and goddesses emerge from classical myths, not as solemn religious figures, but as beings of ethereal beauty and profound symbolic meaning. This was the world painted by Sandro Botticelli, particularly in his famous works like The Birth of Venus and Primavera, created for the Medici family in the late 1470s and early 1480s. Before Botticelli, the focus of painting in Italy had predominantly been on religious narratives or portraiture. The Medici, especially Lorenzo the Magnificent and his cousin Lorenzo di Pierfrancesco de' Medici, actively encouraged a new kind of art that explored classical mythology, humanism, and complex philosophical ideas. This patronage directly led to some of the most iconic and enigmatic paintings of the Renaissance. The Birth of Venus is a breathtaking vision, showing the goddess of love arriving on shore, blown by the zephyrs, standing on a giant scallop shell. Nude and vulnerable, yet radiating a serene beauty, she is a symbol of ideal beauty and spiritual rebirth, ideas deeply rooted in Neoplatonism, a philosophy popular in Medici humanist circles. This philosophy, which sought to reconcile classical thought with Christian theology, suggested that earthly beauty could lead the soul to divine truth. Botticelli's Venus, with her long flowing hair and graceful pose, embodies this ideal. The painting was likely commissioned by Lorenzo di Pierfrancesco de' Medici for his villa at Castello, a private setting where such themes could be contemplated and admired. The painting's large scale and its non-religious subject matter were groundbreaking, demonstrating a willingness to invest significant resources in themes beyond traditional piety. Equally revolutionary is Primavera, or Spring, an even more complex and allegorical work, also believed to have been commissioned by Lorenzo di Pierfrancesco for the same villa. This monumental painting depicts a gathering of mythological figures in a lush orange grove, interpreted as a celebration of spring, fertility, love, and rebirth. From left to right, we see Mercury, the three Graces, Venus, Cupid, Flora, Chloris, and Zephyrus. The figures are rendered with exquisite detail, their draperies flowing in rhythmic lines, their faces serene and beautiful. The ground beneath their feet is covered in hundreds of meticulously painted flowers, each identifiable, a testament to Botticelli's keen eye for natural detail. The painting is dense with symbolism, inviting multiple interpretations, from a Neoplatonic allegory of universal love to a meditation on the cyclical nature of time and the beauty of the natural world. What made these paintings truly innovative was their departure from strictly religious subjects and their embrace of pagan mythology as a vehicle for profound philosophical and aesthetic exploration. The Medici, with their vast wealth and intellectual curiosity, were uniquely positioned to champion such daring artistic ventures. They employed scholars and philosophers like Marsilio Ficino and Pico della Mirandola, who translated ancient Greek texts and developed Neoplatonic theories. Botticelli's art visually translated these complex ideas, creating works that were not just decorative, but intellectually stimulating. The sheer scale of these paintings, their vibrant colors, and the graceful, almost lyrical quality of Botticelli's figures marked a distinct style within the Florentine Renaissance. He did not rely solely on rigorous linear perspective, though he understood it. Instead, he prioritized line, rhythm, and color to create a world of poetic beauty. The Medici's patronage allowed Botticelli to pursue these themes, giving him the freedom to experiment and to create works that were both deeply personal and universally resonant. These mythological masterpieces remain some of the most recognizable and beloved works of the Renaissance, standing as enduring testaments to the Medici's adventurous spirit and their profound impact on the direction of Western art. Number 3, Masaccio's use of perspective. Imagine a painting that doesn't just show a scene but plunges you into it, making you feel like you could walk right up to the figures and touch them. This sensation, this illusion of three-dimensional space on a flat two-dimensional surface was a revolutionary concept in early 15th century painting, and it was masterfully pioneered by Masaccio, whose brief but brilliant career was deeply influenced by the innovative environment fostered by Medici patrons in Florence. His groundbreaking work, particularly his frescoes in the Brancacci Chapel of the Santa Maria del Carmine and his Holy Trinity in Santa Maria Novella, fundamentally transformed painting forever. Masaccio, born Tommaso di Ser Giovanni di Simone, worked in Florence from around 1422 until his untimely death in 1428. His genius lay in his ability to apply the newly developed mathematical principles of linear perspective to painting. This groundbreaking theory, articulated by his friend and fellow Florentine Filippo Brunelleschi, allowed artists to create the illusion of depth and distance on a flat surface with unprecedented realism. Before Masaccio, paintings often lacked a coherent sense of space. Figures might appear stacked or floating, and their scale wasn't always consistent. Masaccio changed all of that. Consider his frescoes in the Brancacci Chapel, which depict scenes from the life of St. Peter. In The Tribute Money, for example, Masaccio uses a single vanishing point, precisely calculated, to create a believable, unified architectural and landscape setting. The figures are placed within this space with such conviction that they appear to have weight and volume. The light in the scene also plays a crucial role. It comes from a single, consistent source outside the painting, casting shadows that further define the forms and anchor them in space. This scientific approach to light and shadow, called chiaroscuro, added another layer of realism, making the figures appear solid and three-dimensional, a stark contrast to the flatter, more stylized figures of earlier Gothic art. The Medici, as leading figures in Florentine society and prominent church patrons, would have been intimately familiar with these works, understanding their profound impact on artistic expression and their resonance with humanist ideals of rationality and order. But perhaps the most striking demonstration of Masaccio's innovation in perspective is his Holy Trinity fresco in the Santa Maria Novella. This painting is a breathtaking illusion, appearing as a real chapel recess, complete with classical columns, a barrel vault, and a coffered ceiling. Masaccio achieved this effect by meticulously applying linear perspective. He painted a vanishing point directly at the eye level of the viewer, making the architectural elements appear to recede deep into the wall. The figures of God the Father, Christ on the cross, and the Holy Spirit, represented by a dove, are placed within this perfectly constructed space. Below them kneel the Virgin Mary and Saint John, and even further down, the patrons of the work, often identified as a member of the Lenzi family, are shown in profile. The Holy Trinity was a visual manifesto of linear perspective. It showed artists exactly how to create the illusion of 3 dimensions on a 2-dimensional surface. It was a fusion of art and mathematics, a perfect embodiment of the Renaissance spirit of rational inquiry and scientific understanding. This painting had a profound impact on subsequent generations of artists, including those directly patronized by the Medici. It provided a foundational new tool for creating realistic and immersive narratives. The Medici, with their intellectual curiosity and their support for humanist learning, would have undoubtedly appreciated the mathematical precision and the intellectual rigor behind Masaccio's revolutionary approach, recognizing it as a pivotal moment in the history of art. Masaccio's genius, though brief, forever altered the way painters conceived and depicted space, setting the stage for all the great masterpieces of the High Renaissance. Number 2, Donatello's David. Picture a young man, slender and confident, standing in bronze, a large sword in one hand, the severed head of a giant underfoot. This is Donatello's David, a sculpture created around 1440 for the courtyard of the Palazzo Medici, the private residence of Cosimo de' Medici. It was a sensation, a bold statement, and an artistic shockwave. Before this piece, truly freestanding, life-size male nudes had not been seen since classical antiquity. Donatello's David was a deliberate, daring revival of a lost art form, directly supported and displayed by the most powerful family in Florence. Donatello, a close friend and protege of Cosimo de' Medici, was a sculptor of unparalleled skill and daring. He had already broken new ground with his naturalistic marble figures and his powerful bronze pulpits. But the David was different. Cast in bronze, a technically challenging medium, it shows the youthful hero not as a muscle-bound warrior, but as a lithe, almost effeminate figure, contemplative after his great victory. He wears nothing but a shepherd's hat and boots, his body in a classic contrapposto pose, with weight shifted to one leg, giving him a relaxed yet poised bearing. The sense of movement and naturalism in the figure was revolutionary. The decision to depict David nude was perhaps the most audacious aspect. For over 1,000 years, since the fall of the Roman Empire, the full frontal male nude had largely vanished from Western art, deemed inappropriate or even scandalous in a Christian context. Donatello, with the explicit backing of the Medici, dared to bring it back. This was a clear nod to classical Greek and Roman sculpture, which celebrated the idealized human form, often nude, as a symbol of beauty, heroism, and perfection. By commissioning and displaying such a piece, the Medici were not only showcasing their immense wealth and refined taste, but also signaling their embrace of humanist ideals and their connection to the glories of antiquity. This was a statement of intellectual and artistic liberation. The placement of the David within the central courtyard of the Palazzo Medici was also significant. It was not in a public square initially, but in a private yet impressive setting. This allowed the Medici and their distinguished guests to appreciate the sculpture's artistry and its classical allusions in a more intimate context. The bronze shimmered in the Florentine sun, reflecting the light and casting intriguing shadows. The youthfulness of David, who defeats a powerful giant through cunning and divine favor, resonated deeply with Florence's self-image as a nimble republic, often facing larger, more powerful adversaries. For the Medici, David became an almost personal symbol of their own rise to power, overcoming obstacles through intellect and strategic action. Donatello's mastery of bronze casting is evident in every detail. The intricate texture of Goliath's helmet, adorned with a classical relief, contrasts with the smoothness of David's skin. The figure is perfectly balanced, inviting viewers to walk around it and appreciate its form from all angles. The David was more than just a beautiful object. It was a symbol of the new era, an era where humanism thrived, where classical learning was revered, and where artists, empowered by visionary patrons like the Medici, dared to challenge conventions and revive lost artistic traditions. It announced the return of monumental sculpture and the celebration of the human form, setting a high bar for all subsequent Renaissance artists. This bronze youth, standing proudly in a Medici courtyard, marked a pivotal moment in the rebirth of art. Number 1. Brunelleschi's Dome. Imagine a city looking up, baffled. For decades, the massive Florence Cathedral, Santa Maria del Fiore, stood unfinished, a gaping hole in its roof, a monument to an impossible dream. No one knew how to build the dome. Architects from across Europe had presented ideas, but none could solve the engineering nightmare: how to construct a dome of unprecedented size without using traditional wooden scaffolding, which would require an impossible amount of timber and would likely collapse under its own weight. This seemingly insurmountable challenge was ultimately conquered by Filippo Brunelleschi, an ingenious goldsmith and clockmaker with the unwavering backing of the powerful Medici family, particularly Cosimo de' Medici. The story of the dome began much earlier, in 1296, when Arnolfo di Cambio laid the foundation for the cathedral. The scale was immense, intended to be the largest church in the world. By the early 15th century, the walls were complete, but the octagon where the dome was supposed to sit remained open to the sky. Many believed it was a task beyond human capability. The city held a competition in 1418 to find a solution. Brunelleschi, with his bold and unconventional ideas, stood out. He proposed building the dome without internal supports, using a revolutionary double-shell construction, an inner and outer dome linked by ribs. He also envisioned a system of horizontal chains and vertical ribs that would act like hoops, binding the structure as it rose, preventing it from buckling outwards. His radical proposal was initially met with skepticism, even ridicule. Cosimo de' Medici, however, saw something in Brunelleschi's vision. As the unofficial ruler of Florence, Cosimo wielded immense political and financial power. He was known for his shrewd judgment and his willingness to take risks on innovative projects and talented individuals. He had already recognized Brunelleschi's genius in other projects like the Foundling Hospital. Cosimo used his influence, both direct and indirect, to ensure Brunelleschi received the commission and the necessary resources. He was not just providing funds, he was providing crucial political capital, convincing the skeptical operae, the Cathedral Works Committee, to trust Brunelleschi's untested methods. The construction, which began in 1420, was an engineering marvel. Brunelleschi invented new machinery for lifting heavy materials, including an ox-powered hoist that could move vast quantities of stone and brick with efficiency never before seen. He devised ingenious systems for laying the bricks in a self-supporting herringbone pattern, which meant the dome could rise without crumbling. He even innovated on site, creating special platforms for the workers and a system for them to eat and drink on the dome itself, to save time on trips up and down. Every step of the way, Brunelleschi faced challenges, from hostile colleagues to the sheer physical demands of the project, but Cosimo's support remained steadfast. The dome was finally completed in 1436, a truly awe-inspiring sight. Its sheer scale, its elegant silhouette dominating the Florentine skyline, and the audacious engineering behind it instantly cemented Florence's reputation as a center of innovation and artistic genius. It became a symbol of Florentine pride and a testament to human ingenuity. The dome was not just an architectural triumph, it was a philosophical statement, embodying the Renaissance spirit of human potential and the triumph of reason over seemingly impossible challenges. Without the sustained financial backing and political maneuvering of the Medici, particularly Cosimo the Elder, Brunelleschi's audacious vision might have remained just that, a vision, forever unbuilt. The dome stands as a monumental testament to a banker's faith in genius, and his willingness to invest in the impossible, forever changing the face of architecture and inspiring generations.